I don't think I make too many videos where I don't share my own philosophy, my own experience, and this is my gun safety video. It might be one of several depending if I can fit it all in into 10 minutes. We're going to give it a shot. I know there's probably lots of gun safety videos out there. I really didn't look. However, I want to add my own philosophy to the discussion because I think I have to if I'm going to go ahead and post gun review videos on my website for responsibility reasons. There's lots to talk about, and there's, as you can see, a lot of things you've probably heard or read or watched before, but there's a couple like this one that might be controversial to some till I explain it. Let's get started. Lots to talk about, as always, and isn't it great? First off, treat every gun like it's loaded. That's pretty simple, right? In other words, never assume that a gun is not loaded. Every time I pick up a gun, I don't care who it's from too, I'll check it and make sure indeed that it's empty. But that being said, I treat it like it's loaded all the time. Never point it at anyone or anything you don't intend to destroy. This is never ever a toy. I know that sounds really dumb, but it's true. We never treat a real gun as if it's an airsoft gun, a BB gun, or a toy. It is a real gun and it deserves your respect 100% of the time. So treat it like it's loaded. Even if you've double, triple checked it being empty, it's still loaded. It doesn't matter. Your finger should always be off the trigger. I'll talk about that in a second. And always point it in a safe direction. Now, when I say point it in a safe direction, I'm talking about when you're handling the gun. This is a SIG P228, by the way. I'll do a separate review video on this later. When you're handling the gun, point it in a safe direction. If you're in a gun store, you ever seen those rubes swing the gun past you? Those are people who don't know gun safety. They do not know gun handling. A pistol is really easy to screw that up with too, by the way, because it's so short. If you're not thinking, it's very easy for you to swing the pistol past the body line of someone standing next to you. Okay, that's someone, again, who does not know gun handling or who was never taught. Don't be like that. Always point your gun in a safe direction when you're handling it. Of course, if it's a defensive firearm, point it in a deadly direction when you intend to use it. But you better know what you're doing in that situation. That's another subject of another video. Safe direction. Treat it as it's loaded. Also, don't trust anybody. If someone hands you a gun, especially an autoloader, a semi-automatic pistol like this SIG, never assume that they knew what they were doing when they gave you the gun. They could say, yeah, it's unloaded. Well, guess what? I don't believe them. Again, I'm going to run my own check. Taking the magazine out, rack the slide several times, and check for myself. I am not satisfied until I've checked for myself that the gun is indeed unloaded. And even after I've checked it, again, I treat it as if it was loaded the whole time. There's no such thing as a second chance with a gun accidental discharge. Just regrets. Did you get that? No such thing as a second chance. Once that bullet leaves the barrel, it's going to hit what it was aiming at. And there's no such thing as a second chance. You cannot recall that bullet. It's on its way. It's going to hit something or someone, and there's no second chances. So it behooves us to handle this thing with great respect. Now, that doesn't mean we have to be scared of it. In fact, just the opposite. It is a tool, just like our knives are tools. However, we treat them with respect. Why? Because we are aware of the damage they can inflict. So don't trust anybody. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's a firearms instructor, my best friend, a gun counter dude. Doesn't matter. You have to check it for yourself, and you have to confirm that this thing is indeed unloaded. And then we're still going to treat it as loaded. Rule 4 is keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. You can tell by looking at lots of pictures in both magazines and on the internet and in movies if that individual was taught correctly in gun handling. Because if they were, they're going to have their finger alongside the trigger guard just like that until they're ready to fire and on target. That's the only time we should ever put our finger in the trigger guard, is when we're ready to fire and we are sure of our target. Walking around with your finger in the trigger guard is idiocy. It doesn't matter what type of gun it is, whether it's a SIG like this, a Glock, a CAR, a Beretta. a 1911. That's just bad gun handling. So keep your finger out of the trigger guard until you're on target and ready to fire. My next rule is don't be stupid. By that I mean treat it as if it was loaded. Do not ever treat a gun like it's a toy, but just don't be stupid with a gun. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to share two stories with you. First off, I had a friend who had a boyfriend. She was a lady, and her boyfriend came over. They were playing Scrabble together. He had a 1911. He supposedly knew guns. He knew how to handle them, whatnot. They were playing Scrabble together, and for whatever reason, he had his gun out on the table. That's not. I don't have a problem with that. But he lost the game of Scrabble, and she said, "Why do you have that gun there?" He's like, "Well, I was cleaning it. Don't worry, it's unloaded." And when he lost the game of Scrabble, he grabbed the gun, put his finger in there, and pulled the trigger. The safety was off. The hammer was back. And here he thought his gun was unloaded. It wasn't, and he shot the board kind of as a joke. The bullet went off, went into the board, through the coffee table, and landed into her thigh. She was rushed to the hospital. They were barely able to save her leg. That's the stupidity I'm talking about. That a guy like that supposedly knew that his gun was unloaded. He had just cleaned it, right? Maybe so, maybe not. I don't care. But what he did was extremely, extremely stupid. Never assume a gun is unloaded. Never point it at anyone unless you are intending to hurt that individual in a defensive encounter. Okay, so just don't be stupid. Be smart. Be sure of your backstop as well. When you shoot a gun, where's that bullet going to land? Is it going to land into a drywall where, how you doing, a family of four in your apartment complex is living? You need to know what your rounds are capable of doing, and you need to know where they're going to land. And a responsible law enforcement official, a civilian with a concealed carry permit, will do this. In fact, sometimes we will resist taking the shot because we know that our backstop is insufficient. There might be some innocents standing behind our shot, or we just aren't sure of what kind of damage it'll do if we miss. And chances are, on your first or couple shots, you're going to miss. Be sure of your backstop. Teach your children to handle guns. That's the controversial one that some people will say, "Oh, don't do that." Well, people who say don't teach children to handle guns don't know what they're talking about. Children will rise to the expectation you set for them. If you buy a gun, this is the worst thing you can do, by the way, is buy a gun, put it in the top of the shelf with a trigger safety, locked or unlocked, doesn't matter, and teach your child that that gun is taboo. That's idiocy. What you do, as I've done with my kids, is you let them handle the gun in your presence using the safe principles I've talked about as much as possible. All the time. And you teach them all the things we just talked about. When you get a gun, you check to make sure it's unloaded. And you have your child go through it when he's able. Now, it depends on the gun, but I started teaching my kids at age 5. That's right, you heard me, age 5. Just like sex education, there's really no too early of a time to start teaching your children on gun safety. Okay, maybe too early, but age 5 and on, at least for the way my kids turned out, that was an adequate age for them to be learning gun safety. And teach them all the things we talked about. Treat as loaded. Point in a safe direction. Don't trust anyone. Keep your finger off the trigger. Don't be stupid. Be sure of your backstop. These are all things your child can comprehend and learn from. And guess what? Once they are able to handle the gun all the time whenever they want, they will not have a curiosity about it anymore. It'll be just as common to them as a fork on the table. Children are smart. Teach them. Set expectations and enforce them. Finally, storing your gun loaded is okay, especially if you've taught your children and everyone else in the house these safety rules. I store mine in a metal box with a simplex lock on it, loaded, but it's okay. That's your second line of defense, is storing it safely in a safe manner, albeit loaded. Your first line of defense is what? Training. Everybody in the house, including the children, are taught about the weapons, and they have respect as such. And guess what? It will not be an issue. You will not have a gun accident if you do this. If you treat a gun like it's taboo and you squirrel it away somewhere, you're setting yourself up for an accident. Those are my rules, basic as they may be, of gun safety. Please adhere to them. and avoid any costly mistakes.